Welcome to part 2 of my laptop disassembly video. Let's go to right where we left off. So now it is time for me to remove the palm rest. So I'm undoing screws, flip it over, pull off that piece that covers the power button, unscrewing the keyboard, and this keyboard ribbon cable, that black thing, is the release tab. Pull it up like that, and then you can pull out the ribbon cable like that. Now I'm undoing more screws, disconnect the video cable, disconnect the touchpad. There's the Wi-Fi cables, speakers, one of the USB ports on the side, and now I'm disconnecting the palm rest. Pull out a screw, and there it is. So here we've got the palm rest assembly. Built into it is the touchpad. It's got the two clickers and the movie part. We can see there's all the touchpad is connected to this control chip thingy, which is connected to the motherboard by this ribbon cable, and the clickers are connected using that one. The screen assembly is held on by these 4 screws called waffle screws because they're big and flat, like waffles. This is what a waffle screw looks like. The video cable, the Wi-Fi cables, and finally, these bars that are held in place by screws on the bottom of the computer. So there it is, the screen. Now right here and here we have the speakers. And this one on the left is also stuck to the back of the computer for some reason. I don't really know why. But this other one can come out. So there it is. This thing here is the PC card port. What a PC card is an alternative for USB devices that became obsolete in the late 2000s. Basically, you could buy a PC card, put it into this port, and it was like adding a new device to your computer. You can see, pops off. There's the connector. And there's the corresponding connector on the PC card. You can see the card goes in there, and there's this spring on the side to help you get it back out again. And that's the PC card. Now we're going to remove the motherboard itself. So now we can just pop the motherboard right off. There's a little plug here. But there it is, the motherboard. This is the motherboard. Now the main purpose of the motherboard is just to connect all the parts of the computer together so they can interact. That's where the hard drive plugs in. That's where the disk drive plugs in. We've got headphones port, microphone port, keyboard port, touchpad port, PC card plugs in there, speakers go in there, one of the USB ports plugs in there, that's where the battery plugs in, that's where the power button plugs in, that's the video port, and that's where the fan plugs in. These two are for a webcam and Bluetooth, but since this computer doesn't have either of those, they don't really do much. So now let's flip it over. That's where the RAM goes in, that's where the Wi-Fi goes in, that's where the CPU goes in. That piece connects next to that card right there. We'll get to that in a minute. And the motherboard also has a few of its own built-in devices. We've got the SD card reader right here. Push the card in, pop it back out. That's a microphone. That thing right there is the power light. And this is the CMOS battery, which stands for Complementary Metal Oxide Semiconductor. The CMOS battery provides a tiny bit of power when the computer is off, so that the clock can keep running and the computer can remember what time it is. It also powers the CMOS chip, which is used to store some basic system settings which will be forgotten if the chip loses power, although some very new computers don't use this storage technique. If I remove the CMOS battery, the clock will reset to the time this computer was first made, and all the basic system settings will reset to their defaults. Also built into the motherboard is a chipset, which is a pair of 2 chips known as the North Bridge, which is that one, and the South Bridge, which is that one. The North Bridge is sort of like the CPU's henchman. It is connected directly to the CPU and controls RAM and some of the devices built into the motherboard that are important to the core functionality of the computer. It's pretty powerful, and it has this light blue thermal stuff on it to help get heat off of it onto the heatsink. All computers need a graphics processor. Most newer laptops have one built into the CPU, but some computers, especially desktops and gaming laptops, have a separate board dedicated to graphics. These boards have an onboard fan, sometimes two, and they have graphics RAM and a GPU, graphics processing unit. This computer has the graphics built into the chipset, and this was a very common configuration a few years ago. The North Bridge does pretty much all the graphics processing. The South Bridge controls devices that aren't as essential to the computer's functionality. It's much less powerful and doesn't need a heatsink. It controls basically everything that the North Bridge doesn't control: the Wi-Fi, SD card, drives, etc., and it can only communicate to the CPU by going through the North Bridge. Some newer computers have the chipset built into one chip. These are usually a lot more expensive, but they're much faster. And that concludes our explanation of the motherboard. Next up is the fan. And like the heatsink, the fan can get a lot of dust in it. Wow, that's a really bad fan. So, yeah, it spins around, sucks air in. Let's see, it was like that, so it would be sucking air in the bottom, shunk, and then blowing it out the side, shunk. So now we're going to look at this board right here. This is known as the charger board, and it holds the power port for charging, two USB ports, the external monitor port, and the network port. So let me unscrew it real quick. I can just pop it out, and there it is. That thing right there is the power button. The button itself is there, and it connects to the motherboard using that ribbon cable. And last but not least, we have the case. There's the fan intake. It pulls in air from the bottom and pushes it out the back. The disk drive goes in here, the hard drive goes in here, the motherboard kind of fits on like that, the PC card goes in there. We've got this little cover here that you can put the SD card, headphones, and microphone into. The speakers and the power button and one of these USB cables is built into it. And, oh yeah, and the battery can go in the back. And that's the case. And we've done it. We've succeeded in completely disassembling a laptop. Now we gotta put it back together. Now, before we reassemble the computer, we need to blow all this dust out of the fan and the heatsink. That was easy. Now let's do the heatsink. Heatsinks usually have a nice big puff of dust. Here goes. Now the fan and the heatsink are dust-free. If you don't have access to an air compressor, you can also buy cans of compressed air, and also usually some vacuum cleaners have like a very thin nozzle with maybe some fuzz on the end. That works pretty well too. Since we don't have much time left and the reassembly of the laptop took me about a half hour, we're going to have to really speed this video up. So the motherboard just went in, putting in some screws. There's the card reader. Put in some more screws. The screen goes on. The waffle screws to hold it in place. There's the Wi-Fi cable getting it through its notches, putting it down through the hole, putting on the palm rest. There goes the touchpad plug, video plug, screws. There's the keyboard. And there's the power button cover thingamabob. That thing on the front that covers the SD card port and the headphones and microphone port. There's the CPU, there's the heatsink, there's the Wi-Fi. Man, I am one fast builder. RAM cards, put on the cover, put in the battery, and I had to check something under the cover because the screw was a little bit messed up, but now it's good. Put in the hard drive, and then I'm just screwing in all the screws on the back. There it is. Now for the moment of truth. Will it actually run? Yay, success. I hope you found this video enjoyable and informative. Thanks for watching.